Hey, David, you know what's weird about having a podcast that apparently a lot of people listen to?
This sudden surge of fame and people want to talk to you all the time.
No, it's when there is no podcast. Like I had to take a couple of weeks off. There were some personal matters and some things that required the vast majority of my attention. So, and throughout the year, we'll take 2 weeks off or a week off here or there. We do it. I think we do an average of 45 weeks out of the 52 weeks in the year. But it's funny the messages that I get. Like if I miss a week, and it's really nice. Like they're
Did you
kind
die?
comments. Yeah, exactly. Like, are you okay? Is everything all right? Did you die? One guy just sent me a message. I missed your voice.
Did you put him on the watch list?
No. He was just messing with me. I'm like, all right. But we're back in full swing here, and interestingly, we'll only be having a podcast here for another 4 to 6 episodes ish. Because then we take off the half of December and then come back somewhere in January. But this one I've been really wanting to get on there. And I think you're the perfect person to have on this with us. I'm going to explain, first of all, what it is and why I think you're the perfect person to have on this episode. Number one, we're going to talk about something that hurts my brain. And it's overcomplicated reports. And we're going to see why it hurts my brain. But I think you're the perfect person for this because for the past 20 years, I have written, I forget how many thousands and thousands of reports. I reviewed probably tens of thousands of reports at this time. Other people's reports from other software, from our software, from Inspector Toolbelt. But you are in a unique position. You're not a home inspector. So you represent the consumer side of things. But then you've also reviewed thousands of reports, I would imagine at this point as well. And there's something that you and I universally agree on. That they are, a lot of the reports, not all of them, but a lot of the reports are just way too complicated and full of stuff.
Yeah,
What? How often
definitely.
do you see that? Like, throw out a rough percentage.
It's hard to. I mean, out of the ones I see, but to be fair, I do tend to see more of the long and complicated ones, just because a lot of times they're the ones that run into issues. But
Yeah.
I want to say that from what I see, it's 50-50, but it's probably slightly skewed. So I don't think it's that like that common among home inspectors. It's probably more like 30-70, 30% complicated, 70% just right.
Yeah, I would actually swing in a different direction there. I would say about 20% of inspection reports I look at, I'm like, wow, this guy's got it figured out. And then I would say 40% are like, oh my goodness, this is a 300-page report, and I know what I'm looking at, and I can't figure out what's wrong with this house according to this inspector. And then the other 40% are like, man, I could use a sentence or two more about this, like just something. Like I need more than it's broke. And and we're not trying to make fun of everybody because I've been on both ends of that spectrum too. I spent past couple of decades trying to perfect my report writing, and I just want to share some things that I've learned from seeing the consumer side, seeing the software side, seeing the home inspection side, and everywhere in between. And I would say the vast majority of our reports are just kind of missing the mark a little bit, one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
But let's kind of go over a couple of things here, David. We're going to break this up into parts. First of all, why complicated reports? When I say complicated, I'm also meaning like long reports. Like I remember this one guy. His template. I've never seen so many comments in my life, and his comments sometimes were 7, 8, 9, 10 paragraphs long. Lots of detailed explanations of possible scenarios, why things were bad, how it should be, and he would just click on those and add these comments in, and his report would be near unreadable. So that's what I mean. When I'm talking about a long report, I'm just talking about lots of information for the sake of having information there. So why that's not good for our consumers. Second of all, why it's not good for us individually and as an industry. And number three, why it actually creates more liability than negates. So before we get into those 3 points, though, David, why do you think guys, home inspectors, write these long, complicated reports now? Because years ago, it wasn't like that. We had to elevate the industry years ago. When I first started, it was like a handwritten report, 3 pages, carbon paper. Now it's a different world. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I definitely think the digital age of report writing has a big impact on this, just because it's easier to make a wordy report. You have pre-created comments, and a lot of inspectors, they have a lot of knowledge, and it's just natural. You want to, want people to see you as a knowledgeable source. So they go into it, they start writing out, okay, this is all I know about this subject. And then, like you said, it can go on several paragraphs. But with a digital report, all you have to do is tap on a button and you write 3 paragraphs for your client for each comment. So yeah, I mean that's definitely what made it easy to become wordy.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. It's easy to write one big long, 800-word comment and then just add that to every report. The reason I find most personally is we think that's what the consumer wants and makes us look awesome. That's what we think it does. And I was thinking last night, actually, interestingly, I was thinking about this because I did this to my nephew. He comes over to my house and he goes, "Hey, Uncle Ian, can you tell me how to start a business?" And instead of just giving him like 3 actionable items, I laid out every bit of business experience that I have accumulated in my lifetime. And the look on his face, he was texting me later. He got on a plane and flew back to North Carolina. And he's like texting me later.
He just left.
He just left. It was like, I'm done with this.
I'm going back home.
But he was texting me later asking questions, and he didn't remember the important points. And he was like asking me about quotes. I quoted Winston Churchill, and I quoted and I quoted, I'm not even making this up. This is hysterical that I did this. And I quoted Teddy Roosevelt, and he's asking me about these random quotes instead of the 3 actionable things that I really wanted him to do. But
you just made me. Oh, go ahead.
No, we'll digress. But it all it did was just bury the important information because I thought that's what he wanted, and I thought it would impress my nephew. And he's like, "Whoa!" And he's like, "All right, this is useless."
Yeah.
But it's
you just made me think of this experience I heard about a person that didn't know they were bipolar, but they found out after I think it was way back, so they like hitchhiked with someone and they started talking to the person in the car with them, and literally like they didn't realize how much they were overloading them, just telling them thing after thing, and eventually that person's like just basically kicking them out of the car.
Yeah, but we can do that to our clients. We think they want everything in the kitchen sink, when in reality, I've had plenty of clients, especially recently, that will say things like, "Can you just give me the big things? Can you do 2 separate reports?" I've even had people say one that just says, "Here's the 3 big things," and then give me the report with all the, as they put it, one guy's like, all the gobbledygook or garbage and all the other wordy stuff. And I thought to myself, I'm like, is that what we've done as an industry? Is that like we've trained people to know that we're going to give them gobbledygook, as they put it.
Created a monster.
We've created a monster. When in reality, I think of a very close friend of mine who's an inspector, and he writes some pretty amazing reports. But when I read his reports, and a lot of his reviews are just like, "Oh, the most amazing report ever, this and that." I'll read it, and he'll just 1 or 2 sentences. Here's the defect. Here's why it's bad. Here's what you do next. And I'm like, the simplicity and conciseness is beautiful. Here's the problem. is that writing simply requires more effort than writing a big long paragraph. I'm going to quote two people. Abraham Lincoln. If you need me
Winston
to,
Churchill.
in Winston Churchill. Well, Abraham Lincoln said, if you need me to speak for 5 minutes, give me an hour to prepare. If you need me to speak for an hour, give me 5 minutes to prepare. So, basically, that's just saying to make things concise and to squish them into shorter periods of time. In that case, but in our case, shorter paragraphs and just a few sentences takes expertise. It takes a level of knowledge and effort to make it concise, but still say the same thing. But especially if you use Inspector Toolbelt, I mean, go in and shorten your comments with AI. So use the AI assistant that we have in there. Say, shorten this comment for me to 2 sentences. You'll be amazed because Einstein said, if you can't explain something simply, you simply don't understand. And we're not saying the home inspectors don't understand. And Einstein's not saying that necessarily, but he's saying it's a next level bit of understanding to say, okay, this is what you do, and this is what the problem is and what you do in 2 sentences.
Yeah. And it requires you, both to know the subject very well and to know your audience. It's a combination of the two because, like a lot of the home inspectors report feels like they're written for home inspectors, which a home inspector would be very impressed with this, but your general home buyer would be like, I lost you after hello.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about that since you're broaching that part of it. Let's talk about the first point: why these long reports are not good for home buyers. Now, you just said something important. Agents and agents and clients are kind of like, I lost you at hello. They're bombarded with so much information. We have to think as home inspectors. The last time we bought a home, there's mortgage contingencies to sign, and you have to learn what escrow is, and there's title work, and then now there's like, oh, well, there's a discrepancy in the title, and we're like, what in the world is that? We're getting bombarded with information. We don't need the home inspection book thrown at us. What they're doing, we have to remember the purpose of a home inspection report, and I think Jay Wynn, who's on this show repeatedly, said it best one time. We are bridging the gap between technical and the average person. And we forget that, and we end up giving the average person a technical manual. We don't think it is. They're like, oh, well, they should know what baluster spacing should be and this and that, and rise and run. And meanwhile, the person's standing there like, what's a baluster? We need to bridge that gap. And if our report doesn't bridge that gap, it's not doing its job. There's a happy middle ground between the technical and the 3-page carbon copy paper reports. And we need to be able to find that.
Yeah. And something like, some people like that information, but what I've seen some home inspectors do, I know kind of jumping ahead a little bit here, but having links to articles instead of having it in the report. Like, if you want to know more about this, here's a place where you can find all the information. Because there are always people out there that I call them weird, but they're just different. But they do like all that information, and they might feel like they need to know all that information to make a decision. But your average home buyer, like you said, they feel like as long as they get the information that they need to understand, what's the issues, what do I need to do about them, that's all they want.
So you say the average person who wants all that information is weird, and I'm going to agree with you because they are an oddity. So the average person reads at about a 6th grade level. Even highly intelligent people, because that's just how we're designed now. Our brain is trained by scrolling through TikTok and watching videos and all this stuff going on. Our brains don't read at the same level that we used to. And I love it when guys put in a link to an article. So instead of taking that article and pasting it in your report, which we basically see. So an example would be water heater's TPRV drain tube is not within 6 inches of the ground. That's a beautiful, concise sentence. You put a picture in, point to the pipe, and say, this is an important safety feature, recommend correction, whatever we want to say. Beautiful and concise. If we dump a whole bunch of information in there, that confuses the tar out of the average person. And then it makes it hard to figure out that information.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time figuring out. So my mechanic, I always bring up my mechanic and my doctor here. Hopefully, I wonder if they listen. But years ago, he used to give this little report about the car, and I didn't read it. I'd flip through it, and if there was something wrong, I had no idea. And then, like 6 months later, the transmission have a problem. He's like, "Hey, it was on page 47," and I'm like, "I,
Oh, thank you.
I didn't get past the opening page, dude." Um, so that protected him, but really didn't make him
Mm-hmm.
look good. Didn't create great business. And you know what he does now? He gets a one pager, and he has like these little lines on the page, and it says, "Watch your transmission, get your oil changed in 5,000 miles. Rear wheel bearing will need to be changed in 6 months." I'm like, "Oh, cool." And then now I know what's happening. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and he can put links and stuff in there to articles for the weird people, because the average person is not going to read our report. I can see data. I can see people that I can tell you that there's a percentage of people that don't actually even open the report,
Mm-hmm.
let alone read it. The vast majority of people just want to know, what's the big stuff? Can we fix it and negotiate on it? That's it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is we listen to who yells the loudest. And sometimes we'll get an email from this engineer who loves our report and is just like, "Oh my goodness, the 832 pages of technical data you put in there really shows your professionalism." And then we'll quote that guy for the next 10 years as we're handing out 852 page reports. That's an exaggeration, obviously. But
Yeah.
that's what I hear. I had a guy recently, he said something like that. "Oh, my clients love my long reports. They love all that data. I can't simplify it." I'm like, "How do you know they love it?" "Oh, I get emails all the time." "How many emails?" "I don't know. It's all the time." And if I know this guy really well, so I started drilling down. Turned out three people thanked him for how long and technical his reports were. And
The
then I said,
weirdos.
the weirdos. And then I asked him, I'm like, I don't exactly remember how this part went down, but I'm like, go back through and find out how many people, or just over the past year, asked you to explain the report. How many times you had to make a phone call to explain the report. How many attorneys had questions. How many, all this stuff. And he goes, "Well, I mean, that's part of the job." And I'm like, "All right, so even just this past week, you've had more people ask you to explain your report than over the past 5 years, the people who complimented you on how complicated your report is." If we really drill down, that's not what people want. They want to know, what's the issue? What do I do? The roof is leaking. It's 25 years old. Go get a roofing contractor. Find a concise way to tell me that. That's really what people want. I don't want to complicate it. I brought out my doctor before on another podcast, and he's just like, this part of your cholesterol is a little high. I'm
Your
like, "Oh,
plumbing is
okay."
awful.
My what's awful?
Your plumbing.
My plumbing's awful. But he's like, he's just like, "Here's some things to do to lower your cholesterol." I'm like, "Okay." As complicated as a human body is, he gave me everything I needed to know in one page.
Yeah. He
It
didn't
was,
tell you what cholesterol is or, you know,
yeah.
how
Here's
they come
examples
about.
of numbers. Yeah. Oh my goodness. But we do that to ourselves, and it's really not what the customer wants. So that's the first thing. It hurts our clients in a few different ways. It makes the report too complicated or intimidating to read,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not actually what they want. And we're tailoring our reports for the minority instead of the majority. So the second thing that it is not good for is for us as home inspectors. So why do you think, David, that it's not good for us as home inspectors?
Well, the first thing I see, working with support in the app, is the more pre-written comments you have. Not to say that you should limit yourself too much, but I've seen some inspection templates that have 50, 70 different comments on a single card, which, slight differences in an explanation, slight difference in the wording. the app is made to make you, we made the app in such a way that you're trying to be as fast as possible on the inspection. But if you have to sit there and scroll through comment after comment and all of them very long, you are not saving time. You're actually making your inspection take a lot longer.
Yeah.
And I have seen that quite a few times. Different inspectors that they say, okay, I need something to cover every situation I run into, but in reality, like you say, a simple comment that just gets to the point could actually eliminate so many of those comments from their list.
Yeah, and I guess that's the issue. So in Inspector Toolbelt, we have a comment library, so you can just type in a couple keywords, or even just start typing a few letters, and all these comments will show up anyways. But like you said, the common thing that I hear is, in this component, I need every possible situation to be able to come up. So a template I saw recently had over 100 variations of comments for one item. So I actually timed how long it took to find the right comment, put it in, and then read it to make sure and check that it was the full right comment, because it was 3 paragraphs long, most of them. And it took me longer to find just the right comment than it would have to just write the comment out myself.
Mm-hmm.
Or in our app, just click AI and say, write something out and then adjust it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to scroll through over 100 comments, you're not saving time. I mean, just if you're an ITB user, I'll just give you a pro tip. Take the top 5 comments. You'll find that 80% of the time, those 5 comments are going to cover you. For the other 20% of the time, use the search feature and get the comment you want. And if it's taken too long, just write out the comment. Preston Kincaid always talks about that. I actually went to one of his seminars recently, and he talked about that. There's no need to scroll through 100 possible comments, or even 20 comments. And then you're trying to figure out which one is just right. At that rate, write a new one. Grab the top 5. That'll cover you 80-90% of the time. And you'll probably find that as you go through your inspections, you're like, you know what? I don't need a different variation for this comment for double hung windows versus single hung windows. The issue is going to be the same. So if we can do that, that'll save us a lot of time in general. But it's bad for us in a couple of ways, in my opinion, for home inspectors. One is going to be time, as you're talking about. Home inspectors always talk about, how can I get faster? And then what I see in the Facebook groups is, well, here, have 7,000 comments ready to go for you. I'm like, that didn't make it faster. Now you just have 7,000 comments to roll through. That's always our go-to, it seems lately. Like, just add more comments. Canned comments or pre-written ones are awesome. But I say limit them to the top 5 at most for all of your items. That's personally for me.
Very reasonable to me too. If your first 5 comments on the card doesn't cover it, maybe you don't have enough cards. Sometimes it might be that you're trying to squeeze too much into a single card. But instead having, a card that describes a slightly different issue, and the comments on it there would be 5 comments there. You can save yourself hours, I'd say,
Easily.
over the week. I mean, so much simpler.
Yeah, and let's talk about how the comment's constructed itself. So a comment is constructed by 1, identifying the defect, 2, identifying why it's bad, and 3, what to do next. So there's variations of that. There's whatever you want to talk about, or your particular SOP in your state or province. But that's basically what a comment's made up of. So if you identify what's the problem, roof is leaking, not performing its intended function. Cool. That's what I need to know. Why is that bad? I mean, water's getting in the house. Sometimes our identification of the problem just kind of is self-explanatory. And what we do next is almost always the same. What we do next is we go and find a particular specialist in that area, a qualified roofer, qualified structural contractor, whatever it happens to be. When we break down a comment into its basic elements, it's actually really simple. We're the ones who overcomplicate it. So we can look at our comments and say, where's all the fluff? And usually where the fluff is explaining how it should be. Which, why send them to a specialist if we're telling them how it should be anyways? And baluster spacing is the one I'm picking on today because that's the one I see it the most. Because baluster spacing is too wide, safety issue. However we want to write that up. Pretty simple defect, pretty common, but I'll see almost a full page in a report dedicated just to this. Pictures of different spheres from Internashi's website, all these different things, and I'm like, all the person wants to know is a picture of what? Of a kid's head stuck in it?
Picture of a baby sticking their head through the...
Yeah, exactly. But like you said, if somebody wants that, put a link to that article and they can read all about baluster spacing. But if I'm the client, I really just want to know, oh, that's too wide, I need to make it smaller. Cool. That's all I really wanted to know. But there's also the legal liability part of things. So you know that old proverb, in many words there is transgression, right, David?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's true. So the more you put in there, especially like you said, when it comes to what should be done about it, now we're telling our clients, okay, this is what I think should be done about it. So now you're making yourself the expert in a field that you might not have as much expertise as your report seems to put, impute. I don't know.
Impute.
Can't think of the word.
Your Swedish is coming out. But David, I'm a real estate agent, and I'm telling you, I love how many of those comments you put in there to tell us how it should be. You know why?
Of course you would.
Yeah.
It
Why?
takes the responsibility off of you.
Boom. You nailed it. And that's exactly it. Of course, the agents are going to say, I love you. I love it when you tell me what to do, because now I don't need to go to that contractor. And guess who all the liability falls on? Us as the home inspector. So
yeah,
it really is interesting. So I had a guy whose wife was an attorney who tried to pull that on me. Wanted me to say, how should it be and what he needs to do to get it to that spot. And a lot of reports have that in there. And turns out he even admitted his wife was just trying to get it so that she could have shared liability with me, so she'd have more people to sue if something went bad. So the other thing that it comes down to with legal risk is too much information or technical jargon can lead to misunderstandings, which could create liability issues. So here's the problem with a lot of content. So let's go back to baluster spacing. Now, we say the baluster spacing is too wide, but now in our description of why it's too wide, we cover a whole swath of things, and one of our images has a picture of the handrail height being too low because it's showing a diagram of how high the handrail height should be. Now, if we don't know, and we're just an attorney, agent, client, whatever, now we're like, well, is the handrail too high? Which is this? And that can create lots of legal liability and issues later on. And to be frank, if that creates misunderstanding, it's also going to lead to people not referring us. What agent or attorney is going to refer us if they have to decipher our report later on? So there's definitely a lot.
Yeah, and it does affect the client's view of you too. If they're like, every time I get one of his reports, I have to like call him up, ask about more explanation. It could end up in our reviews, which would hurt our future prospects too. If they understand everything first read through, it's always going to be a better impression than them having to come to us, ask questions, get more clarification.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. If they need more information, we can provide it. If I were to take some of the actionable things that we've talked about so far to make our reports, and I'm not going to say simpler, because that's not what we're going for. We're going to say more readable. If we want our reports to be more readable and understandable, but still comprehensive, make our comments more concise and use AI to help us. If we can't figure out how to do it, put in our 3-paragraph comment into ChatGPT and say, shorten this please to 2 sentences while still keeping the same basic content. Number 2, stick to the 5 basic comments that we use on a component. If we have 50 comments for what we say for GFCI outlets, I mean, come on. We're going to have GFCI didn't function at time of inspection and like 2 other ones. Stick to maximum of 5 canned comments per item. And then also use a link. I really loved that suggestion you made. Instead of dumping tons and tons of information, put a link in there. Would you like to understand this better? Click here. That also reduces our liability in a certain way too, because now it's not in our report. We didn't provide all that technical jargon. We referred them to, internationally is going to be the easiest one. They have an article on like everything. They have brominated fire retardant article that I just read not long ago. I'm like, who has this? They have an article for everything.
Did you need to sleep?
I don't know. It was interesting though. But they have a link for everything. Put that link in there and just let it be. Reduce our liability and give those once in a while people that want more information something to click on and read. We're really going to save a lot of time that way. But one thing that I always hear, and I was on the phone with a home inspector and I told him all the same basic stuff, and he kept saying, I'm not going to compromise my report. I'm like, I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to say the same thing with less content. I'm not going to compromise. And I'm like, he kept saying that because I think it was just him with some cognitive dissonance kind of fighting it. I'm like, I could say the same thing you did in just 3 sentences. And I did. And he goes, well, what if they want to know more? I'm just like, then I'd give them a link, like you said. I'm like, and he was wondering why his business wasn't taking off, and agents were complaining about his reports, and he kept brushing it off as they just don't want a good home inspector. I'm like, long, complicated reports don't make you a good home inspector. I can copy that content off the internet. What makes you a good home inspector is to be able to bridge the gap between technical and the average person. How do you write that same content in a few sentences with a 6th grade reading level? That's a real measure of somebody who can write a report.
Yeah, exactly. So you have all that knowledge, but being able to express it in a way that someone understands. Without that knowledge is useless. It's good for you, but not for the client.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It makes us feel good, and we get the once in a while email. Oh, I loved how technical your report was. It's going to be like a car with a great engine but no wheels on it. It's not going to take anybody anywhere. So anything else that you wanted to share, David? Because you see a lot of this. You work with the home inspectors a lot with the training sessions and helping them. Anything else that you wanted to bring up?
No, maybe just you can still take your pride in your work. But like I think that's a big thing. A lot of home inspectors, they want to provide the best report possible. But taking pride in giving them a report that can help them to see the issues, understand them, and know what to do. But being able to do so in a way, without like you said, you don't have to compromise your report, but you have to make it accessible to the people that actually are ordering the report from you.
Yeah, and I'll go back to Einstein. Einstein could have explained things very complicated. And if you've ever like done, quantum physics or anything like that, and you want to like read about it on the side, a lot of people don't. He said E equals MC squared. If we ever looked up what each one of those symbols meant and how his equation actually pans out, he could have explained it to the world in the most complicated terms and nobody would have gotten it. E equals MC squared. He just explained half of the universe with just that one thing. And that's why I think he was the perfect guy to say, if you can't explain something simply, you simply don't understand. We're a real inspection genius, if we can explain the complicated in a simple way, help our clients understand things better, and then also at the same time vicariously save us time and limit our liability. That's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we
Yeah, it's a
really need to
win-win.
practice. It's a win-win. That's what we really need to practice as an industry. But I think this was a good discussion, David. Thank you. I think this was actually your idea, put on the board, and hopefully everybody benefited from it. So
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think too, like, as home inspectors, just taking themselves a little less seriously, I guess, can help too. Because I remember just an anecdote to close it off, maybe in high school when I was I was taking a technical class in high school, and we learned all this about cosine and stuff like that. And me and a couple of classmates, we loved talking about it in front of other people because we knew they wouldn't understand us. But the thing is, that's something that you do just to make yourself feel good. But that won't make you any friends, I found out, sadly.
yeah.
But really, like, taking the time to explain something in simple terms that can help people understand it, I mean, that's the way to make yourself some friends of your clients too.
Yeah, that's a real skill, and that's really going to help our business. Our report is the end result of what we do. It's the last thing that people see from us, and it's the way they're going to remember us. So if they remember us as explaining things simply but respectfully while covering all the points, that's really going to win us friends, as you called it, but it's really going to win us agents and clients, and it's really just going to give our industry better value overall. But thanks a lot, David. As always, appreciate you joining in, and we'll see everybody next time on Inspector Toolbelt Talk.
Thanks, Ian.